Hey, welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. We've got a great topic today. Should you really have marketing and sales report to one leader? And today, it's complicated because the alignment hasn't been working out very well, certainly for the last decade. And one of the solutions is to have it report to one person so that that person can resolve the issues, align people on the key objective that that person has, and free up the CEO to do what the CEO should do, is lead the company, but keep revenue, both demand and supply side of the revenue, under one leader. I think it's a good idea. This is the way it used to be in the 90s, that you had the VP of sales and marketing. That person had both hats. And then what happened is it became too complicated. Automation, options, technology, all of a sudden marketing became so specialized that we really separated it and then allowed a VP of sales to focus on sales. Now, the CRO title has been typically just a different title for VP of sales. And, right, everyone wants a C-level title. I understand that. But we think of it as that person's responsible for all revenue, demand and supply. Today, we're going to be talking with a CRO who has both marketing and sales. We're going to talk through the issues. I think they're really interesting for any CEO or anyone who wants to move up into management on either the marketing or the sales side. And maybe this is the solution for aligning marketing and sales. I think there's a lot to it. I think the critical element is, how do you find somebody who can understand both of them? And even the customer success side as well. It's a lot. I mean, it's a high bandwidth job. So we're going to get into that. Also, this week on the the Brutal Truths About Sales and Selling podcast. Sorry, I got so many podcasts in my head right now. Talking about presentations. And we've got a Prezi expert who's going to talk about what really works today in presentations. And for any of your marketing or sales people, you want to check that out. Also, in the previous episode of the B2B show, we had the CEO of Grow Labs. And I've been partnering with Grow Labs on coming up with my magic cadence on getting meetings and starting conversations and using email, not as a blast, not as a marketing automation tool, but as a conversation tool, a way of getting started and engaging. It's about 1/10 the cost of pay-per-click. It's highly focused, highly effective, account-based, persona-based, and we've worked together on several accounts, and I'm coming up with a course January 1st. I'll start the conversation, get the meeting, so look out for that. Let's get into the interview. Hey, Heather, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Heather Combs. I serve as the Chief Revenue Officer at 3 Pillar Global outside of Washington, D.C., And here in the organization, that means I have the privilege of leading our entire sales effort, our customer service, our marketing department, and all the sales operations that goes with that.
Now, that's a pretty unique position, isn't it?
I don't believe the title's used as often perhaps as it should be. There certainly is an opportunity, I think, in this space for more organizations to better align their sales and marketing efforts into a single position at the top that's responsible for the entire buyer journey, whether that's in the very earliest stages in marketing or through the buying process, or once they're a customer and they're being served by the very team that they purchased from.
Yeah, because often, and I've invited probably 100 CROs onto the show, but not one of them has owned anything other than sales. So and I kind of wanted to talk to somebody about this because I think it's needed, because we used to have it this way. In the 90s, it used to be, VP of sales and marketing, or marketing and sales. And then I think right around 2000, they separated it because marketing became so complex that it wasn't just ads anymore. It wasn't just brochures. It became so involved that you needed specialization. And then, sales, obviously, has to be super focused because that's the real measurable thing that a business has. Well, what's your background?
Great question. I don't know that I come to this in the most traditional path. A little bit of all those sides and get to bring them together. So I first moved from the political and nonprofit world into the public company space by going over to the corporate executive board. and quickly becoming an account manager. So there I was servicing clients that had already purchased through their year of subscription and then the renewal process. So that was my first exposure to really the revenue management, sales management. And I eventually slid over in that organization to the sales side of the house, so the new business acquisition piece. And from there, it evolved to the new product launch side. So really taking on that world of taking a new product to market or going into a new market, partnering with other organizations to bundle value together, and those types of things. I eventually held one of the P&Ls at CEB, which then combined the entire revenue picture. So everything we were selling, everything we were renewing, and all of the pricing strategy that went with that, which led me, once I left, into a position really to help other organizations think about how they grow. I think the popular term for a little while was growth acceleration. Today, I like revenue strategist, just to, at the higher level, encompass the idea that growth comes from all of your activities, whether you're really considering how to match up the value proposition and a new market, or whether you're tweaking a product to take into the market and really find a new buyer base at any price range, through any partnership. So I like to think of it as a much bigger picture, and having all those different parts of the background have helped with that.
Yeah, I can see how that would be helpful. What do you run into? I mean, as far as, maybe if you could kind of describe your team. I mean, do you have somebody who runs sales? Do you have somebody who runs marketing and customer success, or have you done it differently?
No, that's a great question. And here at the turn of the year, we're reevaluating what worked across the last year and what continues to be the right path to pursue. Here at Three Pillar, because we work specific to a handful of industries, we have 3 sales vice presidents that report to me and break up the vertical industries that we most heavily serve, so that they can really be experts in their field. And then they have the individual sales reps reporting to them in that structure. And then I have a separate team that is our marketing team, and is broken up in the ways that you might think of more traditionally. So there's a lead of marketing there, and then there are people who focus on the events, or people who focus on our website and our digital collateral. And then there are folks that help with the more traditional aspects of marketing. Our CEO, for example, is working on a book at the moment, and so we certainly are doing a lot of PR work. So that all falls in marketing. And then we have 2 other teams. So one team is our sales operations team that I think of as really being part of the knowledge management and the revenue management. Because we do custom digital software, every contract we have is extremely unique to the needs of our clients. So there's a heavy side of the house that goes into contracting and into building out the teams that then work on these engineering products. And so that team really serves there, which still leaves a very senior need for what we call engagement management. But I think at many companies, it's called client success. It's certainly this idea that once you've purchased and you're in contract and you're working on a day-to-day basis with us, who owns making sure you are delighted by that experience, so much so that you would keep coming back, hopefully expand your efforts with us, and refer your friends and colleagues to buy more from us as well.
Now, on the marketing side, did you put any emphasis on those verticals, or is it completely horizontal towards the whole market?
We do a little of a hybrid of both. We certainly do our best to be present in those vertical markets in a thoughtful way. So events that we attend, so one of our big areas of growth right now is in the health and wellness space, for example. And so we think about what events we're at, or we go to HIMSS, or what case studies we might use. Equinox is a huge, impressive client with us that's doing a lot of neat stuff in their derivative brands, Blink and SoulCycle. And we think about how do we market those case studies? How do we introduce ourselves to that market that's trying to figure out the customer experience? And how do we be present in those events? And our marketing team really takes that on. But they do sit centrally as a team to try to share as a service center of sorts, the responsibilities of the day-to-day writing and editing and publishing and posting and event management, of course, because that travel schedule is brutal.
And do you still run into the classic sales versus marketing conflicts as far as, hey, we're not getting enough leads. Oh, they're not following up on that. How's that working?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite parts of the job being structured this way is, of course, we do. Sales always wants more leads from marketing, and marketing always wants sales to have closed every lead that ever came in. And when we get all in a room, I love that I can actually be the tiebreaker because I'm everyone's boss. And so every once in a while I say, hey, well, you're all on one team and we are that team. And our goal is the total revenue goal of the company. And we've got to do it together. And so I don't have a person to compete with. I own it all. And so I think that really brings a synergy to it that we don't ever hit a silo because of that. We hit this place where we have to work together because their individual goals are my collective goal.
And what unique things have you learned from doing this?
I would say that I think this is more efficient. So you're absolutely right about the 90s and then splitting them back out and then bringing them back together. And I think we're bringing them back together for good and purposeful reasons that are showing success. The world where for a little while marketing owned the brand and the message into the market, and then a bunch of very, very independent hunters ran around in the field and tried to close business, I think is not an accurate picture of how today's process works. I think that buyers come in and out of the two dimensions. So they look at the website and they learn a great deal about a company long before they're willing to talk to a human. And then they start to talk to the human as they've narrowed down their options. And we think of that person as the salesperson, but there's really a two-way value-added dialogue happening between that person inside the company and the person who's considering the company. And in the B2B space, that's an increasingly high level responsibility to have that really value-led conversation and thoughtful challenger conversation around what can we do for your business. But there never stops being questions like, what about pricing? What about contracting? What about the day that we start? What about who are your other clients? And the buyers building a business case inside their own organization, and they need to be going back and forth to the materials and to the website and to speaking to us at a trade show event, perhaps. And having all of those interactions feel like one voice and seamless, where the marketing's supporting the sales and the sales is really coming through that the vision that marketing has already laid out in other formats, I think is as important as ever.
And do you see cases where it doesn't make sense to do this?
That's an interesting thought. There might be in the biggest organizations a place in which transactional sales can be really separated. I've seen a few organizations and all the different ones that I've worked with where you can have, inside sales separated from outbound sales separated from the various markets. But I think in the B2B space where you're customer driven, where it is really about the experience of the buyer, the better you can bring these things together, the more often you're going to find that valuable.
Now, I think you have a unique background that you came from this kind of model, and it's probably more consistent in the services space than it is in the product space. I spent most of my career in the product space, and what I always found, I'm trying to think through of all the people that I've known, the great sales leaders didn't have a clue about marketing and almost ignored marketing. And the great marketing people really didn't have an understanding of how sales works and the urgency and the frustrations that they face. They were very, long, horizon looking, because a salesperson sees 90 days. They don't see the horizon beyond that. And marketing people, they're thinking, 12 months to 18 months out. How do you see, people evolving their careers this way?
I think that that's an important piece of it, because you're absolutely right. When you get down to the levels that are the feet on the street on both sides, so the person who's running around doing event management and they're specifically thinking about the event separated from the person who is doing their sales meetings all day, they do seem fairly far apart. And what I think is then necessary to understand each other is, one, have this collaborative internal experience inside the company that's building it. So to think about it as one team, but then also to crisscross those responsibilities as often as possible. So if you can have your salespeople writing first drafts of blogs, and you can have your marketing folks being the people who man the table at a conference while a speaker's on stage, you start to get exposure to both sides of the equation. If you're answering the questions that a salesperson gets, and you are trying to make sure that you are upholding the brand as a salesperson from the marketing side, that hopefully those skills blend together and build across time, so that we aren't as siloed and individualized as those companies that do it separately are and don't really see the other side of the house.
And how do you keep up with all the technologies that are coming? Because both sides are exploding. The MarTech space, the sales tech space is exploding, and everyone's kind of division of labor gone mad. So from a leadership standpoint, how do you keep current with all of this?
I think I would be completely overestimating myself if I told you I felt current on any given day. It is so hard. Being at a technology company in the first place is in and of itself a window into the world that blows my mind continuously about what is changing and how fast it's changing, and how these companies are utilizing technology to do things that, certainly in my sales background, we smiled and dialed the phone, the actual phone. And now marketing automation, just on any given day, I'm shocked by, and looking at how they collect data about buyers and about potential customers and about markets is just fantastic. So I spend a lot of time vetting myself, but I also push that responsibility to the team and their individual spaces. So, if I get an inbound solicitation from a sales enablement company, for instance, or an add-on tool for Salesforce for the CRM system, I will send it to the team that works with Salesforce and on Salesforce and ask them to vet that technology and to keep on top of what's changing and what options are. And then the same for marketing, as we consider these companies and they're changing, the HubSpots and the Marketos and the Pardots, and I have them doing demos with the companies all of the time and then bringing the best ideas back. So I don't try to do it all myself by any means. I also don't know that I'm superhuman and have figured out how to keep up with all of it. But what I try to do is be present in the market. I myself still attend a great deal of events, and I am chatty Cathy at those tables, asking other people, what are you using? How is it working? What do you think? Is it worth the money? Trying to figure it out every day, how to spend as little and find as much as return as possible.
And I can see this working, when you have a great quarter, everything looks like it's perfect. But what happens, and I've been through, quite a few bad quarters in my career, and what happens is you get that conflict kind of goes mad. And then the CEO used to be the one that used to have to figure it out. How do you figure it out? Have you gone through a bad quarter where, there's a lot of finger pointing and you're trying to figure out, how to fix it? And how did you resolve that?
I wonder if, as a sales leader, you ever feel like there was really a good quarter. I was asking myself that just recently because even with three pillars growing at more than 20% a year, and yet the board would love to see that be 25% a year. So I never feel like I'm catching my own tail. And I think that's the nature of sales, which of course is why it leads to folks like us who are insatiably ambitious to hit goals. We find ourselves in these fields and unable to get out of them. But you're right. And this is, of course, the time of year that we're asking ourselves all of those questions, looking back across the past year and saying, what didn't work as well as we had hoped? Where did we get off track? And one that we have found to be true, and of course I hear about it referenced at conferences, but it is just true in my day-to-day life, which is that as these sales get more complex and more individuals get involved in them, and the legal processes get drawn out, they are just very long processes. Yeah, they're gone are the days of my 90s sales career where you could get someone to sign a contract on the spot. So you remember those magic moments?
Yeah.
Procurement is involved and legal is involved, and sometimes their marketing departments are involved, and all kinds of patent protections are involved. And it just really draws this out. And when you're the salesperson that in the middle of this and you're managing the sales and marketing, you have to be thoughtful about what we can do about that in the world where you're trying to bring in leads, you're trying to work those leads, you're trying to close the leads, you're trying to service your current customers and grow those bases. And yet you have to put time in for a very complex process. I think that it's hard, and that's one that this year has been particularly difficult for us to wrestle with and come to terms with and think about how to staff and organize our processes to improve upon.
And when you're in that board meeting and you're delivering 20, they want 25, what do you ask for? What are your priorities, and how do you solve that gap?
My priorities are probably smart investments, thinking hard about where we can strategically spend our time and our dollars in a way that positively impacts the business, and trying to forever balance that short-term, mid-term, long-term vision. I always feel like I'd be tremendously successful if I could only think about, 2 years out. 2019, it'd be awesome if that were what I'm looking at. But of course, I'm never looking at 2019 for more than about 10 minutes before, December 2017 is very much my priority. And trying to balance that message with the board about investing for growth and growing at a healthy rate where the business that you're bringing in is healthy and has a long-term perspective, but somehow you're doing it quickly. And I think that it has been part of what's organized our conversation about how to structure at 3Pillar appropriately to serve current clients the best that we can so that they are referring other clients to us. That is actually our biggest lead source, is referral from one CTO, one head of product to the next, and how to take that and then turn it into revenue gains for the company so that we can continue to invest in cutting edge technologies, which of course is what we love to work in. And we have 800 plus global engineers who always want to be working on the coolest thing, which means you've got to be in with clients working on the coolest thing.
Now, for the leaders out there that would like to become, a CRO like yourself, where you have that whole ownership of both marketing, sales, and customer success, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think I would come at that question two different ways. One would be the side, work with a company and with a CEO like mine that have the vision of seeing that as a value add to the company, who really believe that sitting on the senior leadership team with a voice of both sides and going to the board meetings with a voice of both sides is a valuable piece of the way the company is progressing. So I would certainly think of like align with other folks who believe this is a valuable piece. And then for those people coming through their career and getting closer to those moments, My universal advice, my favorite advice to give is to lean into yourself, to put yourself on your calendar, to think about the ways that you improve every day, read, or in my world, listen, mostly to books and podcasts, and be ever present of what's evolving in your space and in your network to try to be better, because this time is just moving so rapidly that the only way you get to a place where you can do it all, because we all can't, of course, is to do as much as you can and know as much as you can. And that takes deliberate work.
Excellent. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. If people want to learn more about yourself and what your company's up to, what should they do?
I am on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive. You can find me there, Heather Combs, at 3pillar.com.
Hey, that's a pretty interesting approach. I kind of like it. And I think one of the great benefits of holding that title out for people is that it forces marketing leaders and sales leaders to learn each other's craft. And if they want to get that role, that they have to be fluent in the technologies and the techniques and the talent that is required to be successful in both, because it's a lot of stuff. But I like the idea of it being aligned, because too often I see the fights and the CEO just has no interest in the fight. And the CEO kind of likes a little bit of the friction, and a little friction's okay. But unless everyone is focused on, getting the revenue, the salespeople are too quarterly focused, and the marketing people are too quantity focused. I've seen it so many times, but I like the approach. I think it's worth investigating. Hey, I want to make sure everybody is checking out all the partners of the podcast. Now, let me go through. It's like Pipedrive just announced their partner program. They've got a bunch of integrations that are happening. They've also added email notification to their product. It's amazing. I use it every day. I can find out when people are opening my emails, when they're clicking on my stuff. I get a record of all that, so I know how to engage with them. Also, Prezi, we got a whole episode this week on the brutal truth about sales and selling. It is the way to write stories. Give presentations that are beautifully, graphically, as well as flow from beginning, middle, and end. You got to check it out. Check out Prezi.com. Oh, what else? Gong. Gong's got a great blog, probably the best research going on in the sales space right now. They're focusing on what's really going on and what's the difference between B players and A players in sales today. And it's those critical sales conversations. And what makes a great sales conversation? Scientifically, what is more effective and what is likely to close? They've done the research basing on following all these conversations through the CRM and finding out which ones closed and which ones didn't, which ones took too long. What else do we've got going on? We've got Nudge.ai, their blog. Please subscribe to these blogs, because they're putting a lot of content, and I'm trying to make the podcast an extension of their content so that you can get an audio version of, one guy's take on it and have other sales experts on there. I've got a co-host now on the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast when we talk about some of these topics. So check them out. Also, make sure you're connecting up with me on LinkedIn. That's where I post a lot of kind of the text versions of these topics and, short form if you just want to read through them, as well as videos. So check that out. I connect up with everybody who sends me an invite. No need to personalize it. Just send an invite. I'll get it, and we'll be connected. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.